Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site is Claudia Duran, Regional Managing Director for Endeavor North America, Gina Gotthilf, co-founder of Latitude, and Julia Figueiredo, Director of Americas with Partners for Growth. We are here to discuss how strategic investments in emerging economies serve as a critical tool for fostering economic stability and enhancing national security. Strategic investments in emerging economies are not only a means of fostering economic growth, but also a critical tool for enhancing global security. Our panel today will delve into how initiatives like the America's Partnership Investor Network, known as APIN, are driving sustainable development, strengthening entrepreneurial ecosystems, and creating long-term economic resilience. Business leaders, policymakers, and national security experts will share their insights on leveraging investments as a means to bolster both economic stability and national security. Ladies, it is great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Before we get into the conversation here, Claudia, let's start with you. Tell us about your role with APIN and how it is strengthening the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I represent Endeavor. We're a global organization supporting high-impact entrepreneurs around the world to scale their companies by connecting them to different resources like investment and mentorship, but most importantly, peers, founders. And APIN is an initiative that we thought it was very important to really connect the public sector and the private sector to be able to deploy capital into the region where 12 countries have aligned to receive, support to focus on economic development, but most importantly to help these entrepreneurs be able to scale their companies, generate jobs in the region, and be able to really succeed. So for us, it's really important this partnership between the public and the private sector, and we are here connecting both.
And tell us about the work that you're doing at Latitude, Gina.
I'm the co-founder of Latitude, and we're an early stage fund, the first check for entrepreneurs in Latin America building in the tech space. And basically there's a huge gap when it comes to funding those early entrepreneurs who might have a good idea or a desire to build solutions for hundreds of millions of people. And it's really hard to get started without that initial capital. And so we came in to A, find the best entrepreneurs across the whole region, and B, help them bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's not easy starting a startup, that's for sure. Julia, tell us about Partners for Growth.
Yes, so Partners for Growth, we are a private debt fund, and we provide custom debt solutions for high growth tech companies globally. So we have portfolio companies in the US, Asia, Middle East, and Latin America.
And Claudia, how can you measure this impact? What have you observed in terms of the work that you're doing at APIN with economic stability? How can you quantify the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so this was launched in July of this year, and so far we've raised 1.7 million, in pledges to be deployed as investment in the region, and so far 92 million have been invested in entrepreneurs in the region. So for us, it's a great measure of success that it's already working. This investment is being already done, and we are measuring and having metrics on results, right? Of hopefully this 1.7 billion can be deployed, and this will continue to grow as more pledges and more investment funds are adding to the pledge. So it will only continue to evolve and grow, hopefully, and we're going to see how many entrepreneurs and more entrepreneurs receiving these investments in all these countries. So for us, success looks like, founders getting the investment and more investors, signing up to the pledge.
And Gina, you had mentioned before, it's not simply about funding these startups, but there are challenges that these startups face operating in a global tech ecosystem. So how are you supporting them?
Yeah, starting a startup is hard anywhere in the world, but particularly in emerging markets, you have a lot more challenges. You don't have the resources. The economic situation is always unstable. And so we bring entrepreneurs together so they can meet each other, but then we connect them with the best mentors from Silicon Valley and beyond, and also across Latin America. And then we do sessions with them, and we help them figure out basically their strategy from 0 to 1, so that they can then get to a point where they can raise a little bit more capital and actually figure out what their longer term strategy is.
Yeah, especially the demographics are so attractive in Latin America too, particularly when you think about the tech, fintech spaces and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity and addressable market there.
Huge opportunity. There's hundreds of millions of people who are unbanked and don't have access to basic things like health and education. And every single area you look at, there's opportunity for massive growth. And we think that tech is the best way to do that because it can reach huge scale with very low costs.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that, Julia. When you think about the impact of growth lending in Latin America, the Latin Growth Lending Fund, you've really initiated and influenced the growth trajectory of startups and the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem. Tell us more about that. You know, to Gina's point, it's not always so easy to access capital.
Yeah, for sure. And in Latin America, there is a lack of investors, VC, and lending on this growth stage. So entrepreneurs can find some early stage investors, seed stage, Series A, but when they are in that inflection point, when they're almost getting to profitability or they need more support and bigger checks, that's missing in the region. So that's why we, Partners for Growth, partnered with IDB Invest in 2020 to create this growth, this fund to lend to this type of companies that need bigger checks and they're on, if not yet profitable, on their way to profitability.
Yeah, let's talk about the framework for a moment here. You know, your current policy objectives, legislative priorities, what's being put into effect to strengthen these frameworks?
So we are all part of the America's Partnership Investor Network, and Gina and I are investors in the network. Claudia is with Endeavor Miami, is leading the charge on helping bridge the government and the private sector. So we are all together working on providing capital, mentorship, and connections to help these entrepreneurs grow. So we think it's really important to bridge together government and the private sector to help this initiative.
You know, especially where the framework is lacking or it's not in place yet, it does make it challenging, doesn't it, Claudia, when that framework isn't in place and you're trying to figure out what your operating strategy looks like. Do you have any success stories to share? How have you helped them mitigate some of those economic and operational challenges?
Referring to founders? I mean, at the end, we are talking to entrepreneurs, all of us, on a daily basis. So we are looking at the different challenges, especially in the region like Latin America. You know, there's lack of access to capital. So it's really hard for founders to be able to raise that capital. And then there's a lot of hurdles they have to jump to get to at that scale, for example, at the growth stage. So for us, it's always about connecting them to resources, people that can help them, you know, jump those challenges or tackle them, and then get the right investors at the right time. So from early stage investment, like for example Latitude, to a growth like PFG, so all the spectrum. So we're in the middle making those connections. That's why it's so important for all of us to work collaboratively, right, together to be able to advance this and make it a success. And that's why we believe in bipartisan, you know, this has to be public and private, but everybody, you know, collaborating equally.
Do you have success stories that you could share specifically connecting Latin American entrepreneurs to global investors?
Yeah, so we have certain companies or founders in Uruguay, for example, that have received investment already from some of the investors that have signed the pledge. And so what's happening is when those connections are done, the investments is deployed, and then we report, okay, how much money was invested in these companies, and then the founders will continue to be able to access further funding from the pledge, right, once they go to the next round of funding.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, since we started this initiative with started in the White House in the summer of this year,
July.
Yeah, we signed a pledge of $1 billion.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and now this pledge is at 1.7, and out of these 1.7, from July to today, we've deployed 92 million. And then in health tech, fintech, climate tech.
Climate tech's a key area that we've been covering as well, because it is capital intensive, right? When you're thinking about the energy transition and so forth, and looking at alternative ways to finance this. I think that's an interesting area to be in. One thing I noticed, Gina, with Latitude, you're driving innovation through the model itself, right? So you're combining fellowship, digital tools to fund and support these startups, because funding is one thing, but advising and mentoring and providing those resources is something else. Just putting money to a company doesn't really help them.
No, it's super important that there is money available, which is like
Right.
the problem to begin with, but just there being money available doesn't do that much. Especially, first of all, it's hard for entrepreneurs to even understand how to get that money. Like most of us, we have careers, we've done really well in our academic careers, but we've not been taught like how to go and convince someone to give you money to be able to make your dream happen, and there's a certain way to do that. And there is a gap when it comes to doing that for Latin Americans and the US, for example, or global investors. And so bridging that gap and how to communicate and how to think strategically about how much money do you need and for what, and how are you going to think about profitability in the short term, mid-term, long term. It's different from the US, for example, like where you have the luxury maybe of staying non-profitable for a really long time and counting on those next rounds of capital. And in Latin America, that's not going to be the case. And so helping you find the best resources, the best people, the best mentors, and the best advice to get you through those hard weeks when you just don't see a way out can really help a company succeed in the long term.
Yeah, which I'm so glad you brought that up, because this valuation reset that we did see, let's call it 2022, I think that almost needed to happen. Not just to get multiples back down to earth, but for advisors to teach their companies, how to operate efficiently, how to maintain proper governance, how to be profitable, derive revenue, not just simply throwing money for growth at any cost. And I think you're coming in at that sweet spot. Particularly now, is the expectation for 2025 investments is supposed to ramp up, but they're doing it not so much in a play to win mindset, but more to a play not to lose. And I think that's really important when you think about the operational part of it as well.
Yeah, and I would add also that it's very important to put the region on the map. There's a huge opportunity for investment in Latin America. There's so much innovation coming out of there that I feel the world has to see this opportunity, and that's why it's so important to start shining a light on the founders that are from there, and then bridging that gap with investors in the United States, in Canada, right, and other. So for us, it's really key to really elevate and position these entrepreneurs in the region, because they've been overseen for a long time, and not many people looked at Latin America as an attractive market, but it is a very attractive market.
And I think you're so right, Claudia. And I think one thing we don't talk about often is that Latin America as a region has a GDP that's twice the size of India, but in terms of venture capital investment, we're at a third. So the potential for growth is massive. And then when you look at percentage of companies in terms of the market cap, in terms of the GDP of the region, when you look at Latin America, we're like 3% or something like that. And then when you look at the US, it's 50%. But that's a huge gap. Look at just India and China, we're closer to maybe 20, 30%. So there's an obvious opportunity right now to be seized in terms of tech and with AI. And stocks are cheap too, comparatively to other parts of the world. So it's a really great opportunity.
Yeah, and that's what I had mentioned before about demographics and addressable market. It really is quite attractive in the Latin American region. Of course, as we mentioned before, having a framework in place certainly does help to accelerate those efforts. But I want to talk more about the future of global security through economic development and how investments in emerging economies can help shape those national security strategies, which is just as important as having an attractive demographic.
Yes, this partnership actually started within the White House with the Security Council, National Security Council, and when you have economic growth, economic stability, this means national security, right? So I think we all know that China and US compete globally economically, and having a strong presence in Latin America, which is 35 countries, so it's not as easy to work with 35 countries. And I think that partnership brings together slowly. Now we are 12 in the partnership, but we're bringing together more countries and these governments talking and working together to provide economic prosperity and develop the countries in Latin America will benefit immensely the US and Canada as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the risks to investing in emerging markets is geopolitics. I mean, that's nothing new. So to be able to bridge that gap, not only just bridging the gap from a national security perspective, but then that's how you fix the wealth gap as well. I mean, education, financing, basic financial literacy is the key for all of this to happen.
And that's why there's so many fintechs emerging from Latin America, right? Payment solutions, accessibility to banking, and this is very important for the region. And also, this public-private partnership is so important because, as we know, U.S. is mostly private investment and then China is more public. So this is a big opportunity for all of us to work collaboratively to really make sure that we're generating jobs in the region and there's more economic stability.
I also think there'll be more accountability and transparency as well with the PPP for sure. Gina, tell us about your experience at Duolingo. Right, 200 million users is quite extraordinary, right? Big company, and now you're advising startups. What lessons did you draw from there to help advise your companies?
So many. So I think the most important one is, in my career, I've been asked to help companies grow without any budget. So Tumblr before this, and then Duolingo. So it's like, please make us grow. Here's no money, and that's amazing for Latin America because money is scarce, and you just have to be that more careful with how you're spending it. And so changing that mindset for how we're going to deploy money towards growth to what are some of the organic channels and how do we do product-led growth and actually think about that problem from that perspective can really help companies grow more sustainably, and especially during hard times when capital is less available. I would say that's number one.
Right, especially as technology evolves so quickly. So not only are you thinking in terms of operating in the CFO role, but then you're also thinking about product and how you're being competitive, especially with AI. I mean, AI has totally changed. Totally changed and the roadmap.
And marketing stuff too, because there's a couple channels that dominate the market when it comes to online marketing, and they become completely saturated, and then it becomes more and more expensive to buy a user, and then those algorithms change, and so just you find yourself in a position where you're buying users and you can't get out of that chain.
Right.
So if you can get yourself out and really think about how to solve problems for people in a way that they'll not only use your product for a long time, but also share it with their friends and come back again, then that makes a really good product and solution that lasts.
That's why climate tech is so interesting, because it's not like one person owns that technology or solutions. We just had climate tech companies on before, and they were saying it's like 1,000 flowers in the field. There's so many different types of technologies that can be deployed, which is one of the areas that I think is quite attractive.
Yeah, so right now climate tech is a big topic within the partnership in Latin America, also fintech that we talked about, health tech as well. And I think we all, everywhere globally, climate tech is important.
It definitely is.
In Latin America is beautiful in terms of our resources.
Right, I was going to say, that goes directly to the source.
Yeah, we have green things there. We don't see them around here in New York so much, but we have we have the rainforest.
But we also need to protect them. So that's why these initiatives are so important, and that there's so much fertile ground in LATAM for innovation around climate tech that can be exported to the world. And so I think that's where it comes, how can we connect the region to the world to export, and then obviously import other solutions. So that collaboration between entrepreneurs in that space is very important.
Claudia said something that I love, which is exporting from Latin America to the world. I think that's where I get most excited, because most of the world is more like Latin America than it is Silicon Valley, for example, in terms of problems that people face and solutions that can be deployed. So if you find solutions that work for Latin America, the chances of them working in other parts of the world are huge, and then the market size is fantastic. So from an investment opportunity, that's exciting to me.
Yeah, it is. If I could stand up and high five you, if that was appropriate. Because that's one of the traps that you can fall into in the tech space. If you attach AI or blockchain, that was in 2018, everyone was attaching blockchain to their name. You have to be deliberate in terms of the problems that you're looking to solve, right? Not just put money at something. And I think that's really important, especially when you're advising your companies and helping them manage their expectations, that there is a lot of competition, and there needs a problem that needs, don't create a problem that doesn't need to be solved.
Correct.
Right? Which is why, I feel climate tech is interesting. Women's health tech is another one that we're seeing a lot here in the U.S., but I know it's a focus around the world as well, considering we're more than half the population. So appreciate everyone's.
Yeah, and that's something else that we are focusing on with the partnership, is to help women entrepreneurs.
Right.
Because it's already hard to be an entrepreneur in Latin America. Being a woman entrepreneur in Latin America is even harder. So we are trying to help them and give them more resources so they know where to get the money, how to get the money, and how to foster their communities.
And prepare them to raise the capital. It's a very hard journey to do that. You receive a lot of no's, so how do you continue, not give up and take it personal? That is part of the journey of raising capital, right? You need to find the right partner. It's a long-term partner, right? Your investor, you want the right one to be able to grow together. And so that preparation is really key for us to help the entrepreneur not just receive the money, but now, okay, how are you going to really invest it in your growth?
All right, appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.